Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
And good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for Monday, May 14th, 2018. Happy belated Mother's Day to any mothers listening to this. And Duane, before we get started, people are wondering, where's your friend show, Kevin? And why are you late today? Well, it was terrible Mother's Day for my stepmother. She is in pain and she's in the hospital, so I wish her speedy recovery. And now you know why. So here we are, 4:30 on a Monday. I'm wide awake. That's such a difference. How you doing, Duane?
Better than you, I suspect, but best wishes for your stepmom.
Yeah, she's fine. She's fine. And it's nothing important, but she needed a on-air shout-out, at least, on this Monday after Mother's Day.
Fair enough. My mother, if she had to pick a team, would probably be the Bristol City, and Bristol City failed to qualify for the Champions League playoffs after having a decent season this year. That was more of my uncle's team. My uncle who passed away 2 years ago now. He was a diehard Bristol City fan. So even though I am, as everyone knows, an insane Manchester City 100 points fan, I still do keep an eye on Bristol City, which is where the other half of the family lived from the UK. So there you go.
Our friend Simon in Vancouver, Simon Fudge, who works for FIFA.com, is not happy as well. He's a diehard Bristol fan. That's where he's from, and he has seen Bristol play many times. And unfortunately, Bristol will not be promoted to the Premier League next year. And yes, you can follow us, by the way, on social media. Duane at 24th Minute, myself at Kev Laramee, the show at Soccer Today SPN, Sports Podcasting Network.com, as you can see on our brand new ticker at the bottom of your screen. Duane, before we move on to the Canadian review and talk about terrible weekend for Canadian team. At least one team got 1 point, but the rest was pretty abysmal. And there's a lot of news in the sports world in the United States. So we're going to talk about this in a while. But a big weekend. It's the ending. It's the Sundays of all Sundays, where every single sports channel on TSN and Sportsnet, at least here in Canada, is showing a Premier League game at the same time, 10 a.m. on that Sunday. It's a classic now, but it wasn't really... Nothing was really up for grabs, was it, yesterday?
No, there was really nothing up for grabs, honestly. Even right down to like the seventh place, because seventh place will likely grab that last Europa qualifier. The true drama in England is that right now I was actually recording this at 4:38 p.m. on Monday afternoon. The Fulham versus Derby playoff game is happening, and they're doing the requisite shots of people crying in the crowd of Derby right now, as Fulham is really seconds away from advancing to Wembley. So yeah, no, it wasn't much going on there. Swansea could have caught up to Southampton, and but right down City, and they played 0-0 to the end until Jesus decided to save a 100-point dream.
What does it say though? Like, Jesus says no to Swansea. That's pretty much what it was. Like, Jesus is like, nope, not for you, not this year. You're going down. But
it took all the hope off right then. Not a lot going on. That really, honestly, I mean, we joke, but that whether City would get 100 points or not was probably the only thing that was really interesting on that final day, because the Champions League spots have been really qualified. Their third and fourth had been sort of decided. Chelsea was stuck in fifth. You looked at Burnley, which was, I don't think we talked enough about Burnley's season and finishing sixth. And it'll be very interesting to see what Burnley does with that Europa League spot, really qualifying spot that they gained from that. So we'll be curious to see how they handle that next year. But Everton finished seventh. I believe it was Everton anyway. I'd have to check to be 100%.
What a turnaround, right? What a turnaround for Everton. Sam Allardyce.
Everton was eighth. Burnley was seventh. They get the final spot based on they haven't officially got it yet, but unless something weird happens in the FA Cup, both teams are disqualified and they somehow give it to a team that's not in the top four, top five, I should say, then it'll go to them. But yeah. Not a lot going on the last weekend.
You mentioned Burnley, and Burnley are in the news this morning. Well, Europe time this morning. Canadian international, we know he's Scottish, but Canadian international, Scott Arfield, has been signed as the first signee for Steven Gerrard with the Rangers, Glasgow Rangers. And that's where Scott Arfield is going to be. So no, he will not be in the Premier League next year. We will only have one Canadian so far in the Premier League in 2018, 2019, hopefully, with just Junior Hollett, who just got promoted with Cardiff. So that's interesting. Scott Arfield moving to Scotland.
Yeah, well, we just assume, although, yes, I understand that Stephen Gerrard did not actually make the signing, but it does not make the joke any less funny that he just got mixed up and thought that it was Scott Anfield, and then he signed him. So there you go. No. I don't know what...
He knows Liverpool. Okay, I'll sign this guy.
There you go. One letter difference. And every time I see Scott Arfield's name, I read it as Anfield in my mind, right? So that's where that comes from. I don't know what to think about the Arfield signing. One thing I suspect it's good financially for him. Rangers is, a club that does aspire to get back to its old days and play in Europe and challenge Celtic for the top of the Scottish Premier League. But is the top of the Scottish Premier League something that should excite us? I'm not too sure. And they're making a big deal out of this. This is a marquee signing for them. So he will play a lot. He was playing a significant amount of time at Burnley and was an important piece of them. And the fans there, if you look at some of the reaction to him leaving, they're very respectful of his time there and thankful for him for his time there. But at the same time, he was a player that maybe was kind of stuck between levels. And there were a lot of people that wanted him to maybe come to Vancouver. He was linked to play in MLS at a higher role. That did not happen, probably because the financials weren't there to make it work. And by the way, Fulham has advanced to Wembley. They are now one win away from getting back to the Premier League. This is a live Sports Podcasting Network podcast right now.
The beauty of live is we can add things to the lineup just like that. And Scott Arfield, we'll see what the ramifications of him going to Rangers. Champions League, maybe not right away. It'll take a few years, maybe a year at least. It's going to be difficult to take Celtics spot. Because it's Celtics or bust, right? And Celtics has been won about 100 championships and trophies in a row. Haven't lost a game since like 2008.
When Rangers were liquidated, about a decade ago. So it's
Celtics has been dominating. Yeah, it's been a long time. So we'll keep an eye on this. And speaking of keeping an eye, it is time for the Canadian review. Duane, 3 games with Canadian teams involved this weekend, and no Canadian win. Not a lot of good results, not a lot of positive. Let's start Vancouver on Friday night, receiving Houston at home. Houston has never won a game at BC Place, and it looked like they were going to do it. Up 2-1 in extra time and extra minutes. But Vancouver did what Vancouver does best. They kicked the ball really high, really far, and got a head on it. Kendall Waston with the equalizer late in extra time and getting the 1 point, shared points, but it was a late rescue for Vancouver. It all started with a Felipe, you want to call it a Hail Mary, I would not disagree, and then it bounced a few times and Kendall Waston was able to put a head on it and tie it late. But 2-2 draw for Vancouver, which just, at least it's not another loss, and it's better than the other 2 Canadian teams. Let's just put it this way.
No, well, yeah, it's definitely better than the other 2 Canadian teams. That is certainly one way to put it there, Kevin. But at the same time, you have to snatch it at the end, the type of way that it happened. Or are we satisfied, Vancouver fans, with drawing points here and there? Again, not a team that's bad, not a team that's good, and nothing that I see from them really takes me away from that kind of now cliched almost trait. It's like a sports Soccer Today meme at this point that I say Vancouver's not good, they're not bad, they're just Vancouver, and here we are. But it's I don't know what more to say about them. It's the same every week.
They don't look particularly dangerous. They had to work really hard for that equalizer. It came in I think it's a mix of errors on Houston's part to trying to defend that 1-goal lead at all costs, and we all know what happens when you put 11 men behind the ball in extra time. Well, you're going to try to absorb the pressure, and eventually you're going to maybe concede once, and boom, your league is gone. For Houston, a team famously known for not traveling well, I don't know if it's the case. I kind of was impressed by a certain run of time on Houston's play about the middle of the second half. But it's still, for Vancouver, if they want to not just be in the mix for a playoff spot, but maybe for a home field advantage, which can really be an advantage even in Vancouver. No one wants to play there. So it's truly an advantage. But to get that advantage, you need to put yourself in that position on the standings. And it's not what draws against Houston at home that you're going to get the job done. And look, I'm not saying Montreal and Toronto are doing any better. No, right now, the best Canadian team right now, let's face it, it's still Vancouver. But doesn't really tell you a lot because I guess we forgot how to play soccer north of the 47th this year.
Well, east of Kenora, maybe. I don't know. We'll talk about the other two teams in a minute. And Montreal might have an excuse. I'm not too sure what Toronto's excuse is, and certainly that's probably the story of the day. This is the great dilemma about the Robbo out stuff, is because I completely understand the frustration, but then you look at it, you take a step back and go, well, he's got them kind of in that playoff mix, and is that good enough? And I guess it sort of speaks to what is successful in Major League Soccer. Is successful getting fifth, sixth, fourth sometimes. Maybe you get up to third or second occasionally, but you never really contend. You're never really amongst the best teams in the league. You just sort of putter around in the middle. You get yourself a ball in the lottery every fall, and away you go. Is that success, or is success having that's just say for the sake of argument that TFC is going to have this kind of season that so far they're having, that it doesn't stop, that for some reason they can't turn it around, and the injuries or whatever, that just causes a pile on, and they go back to being, KFC for the year, and they had that championship run. What is more successful? Who would you rather be if you're a Whitecaps fan? Take the Toronto equation out of it. Would you rather have that glory season and then kind of go back and be bad or whatever, or would you rather kind of have a whole bunch of mediocre seasons? I don't know. What's success, Kevin?
Yeah, that's fair enough. It's a good question because look, there's no success in Montreal this year so far, and let's put it this way: Montreal lost their 5th game in the last 6, 8 in the last 11, 8 out of 11. No draws here. Montreal is either winning games or losing games in 2018, and it's the way it happened. There was whistles and boos at the end of the game on Saturday at Stade Saputo versus a beatable opponent in Philadelphia. You're going to tell me, Kevin, they hadn't won on the road in 16 occasions. They were maybe due. Maybe you're right. But at home in the afternoon, 16,000 fans, beautiful weather, kind of have to give better than that. And 2-0 for Philly. Joey Saputo was not happy. The owner and president of the Montreal Impact addressed the players after the game, mentioning this will not cut it, apparently, according to multiple sources. So we'll see what happens, but this is clearly not good enough. This is clearly a fatigued team that we've seen on Saturday. You have 3 games in 8 days, and for 2 of those 3 games, it was the exact same starting 11, and I think there was 2 changes from the game on last Saturday throughout the week. So you're looking at a tired team, and substitution late in games all week long, the 3 games, led to a tired Montreal Impact. No sparks from a Nacho Piatti. Nacho Piatti's not necessarily been himself for the last few games. It's been unrecognizable when he has point-blank shots like he had midweek in Chicago and just shanks it. You're wondering if he's playing at 100%, and you're wondering if he's lost his, he had one guy he trusted next to him earlier this season. Jason Vargas is now with an injury. He might be missing a few weeks. Maybe he lost his partner in crime and now doesn't trust anyone with the ball. I don't know. But this team is clearly missing a lot. And on top of it, red card to Daniel Lovitz, which means another defender not available next week. I don't know what the Impact is going to do because the amount of defender left on the roster is getting really, really thin.
I was a fullback in high school.
Okay, 647 Adam Brass. I'm sending you a text right now with Duane's phone number.
There you go. I might need a little more than a week to get back into my playing shape. My playing shape might not quite be good enough. No, look, the Whitecaps, the Impact. You mentioned Piatti and his play. It's an awful lot of pressure to have to carry a team for a long time, and that can play a big role of it. It can just wear on you, right? You have so much pressure on yourself that you're not able to step up. I believed, and Kevin, you had higher hopes for the Impact at the start of the year than I did. I wasn't trying to be rude about the Impact, about anti-Montreal or something like that. I just felt that this would be more of a rebuilding process, and we're sort of seeing that play out. I do think it's going to be very interesting to see what they do in the summer window. I think that the Impact, because of the opportunity for management to understand the league a little bit more, sort of coming in with that fresh start, getting a look and having those connections in Ligue 1, might allow the Impact to have one of the greater sort of summer windows of any team this year, right? And it's cool. I think that's kind of where you're at right now as you're waiting for this. You mentioned that they were booed off the pitch. There was boos and whistles at the end of the game. How much of that, Kevin, let me ask you this. How much of that is about the Impact, and how much of that is about just how bad Montreal sports have been over the past 18, 24 months?
Are you saying
how much of it is just that frustration?
Are you saying it's a compilation of all those feelings just adding to each other and then maybe causing an outburst directed? The thing is, if you're looking at the Twitter feed of Nicolas Martineau of TVA Sport, who's silent reporter during the French broadcast of the Impact's game on TV, fans, when they were leaving the game after Phila's second goal, were yelling not really nice things at Rémi Garde and his coaching staff and the players on the bench. It has become now of course, a lot of people we predicted this here too. We talked about a discovery year for Rémi Garde and his staff, and we've talked about how the big game that needs to happen in 2018 in Montreal is not even really looking at the standings and where you're at and you're fighting for a playoff spot, but it's to have the second half of the season better than the first half. You're going to tell me it's not going to be hard, and right now you're right, but it's about progression. It's about discovering ways for Rémi Garde to be effective with his players, effective with his tactics, with his personnel as well, with his training staff, to be able to adjust, have the right amount. And at the beginning of the season, we've seen a lot of great adjustment in game, and it didn't really always end up with points. We talk about the 4 defeats in a row and all those things. But Rémi Garde needs to find his footing again. He seems like he's questioning himself a lot lately, and he's questioning his tactics, and he's putting everything into question because it's not going well and it's not going as he expected. But maybe he should trust himself a bit more and just do what you think is right. Not necessarily give away to. He mentioned in the post-game conference saying, I did do my substitution late in the game and probably later than all of you expected. And what I read in that comment is like, he's close to giving away. He's close to be like, you know what? Okay, I'm going to do my substitution. If you are in his position, Rémi Garde, they're not going to fire him anytime soon. Why? Because he's the biggest manager Montreal has ever hired in soccer ever. The pedigree, the resume, and the experience. And you kind of have to give him time, give him trust. Rémi Garde out, it's not the time. And you can't really compare the fact that Aston Villa didn't go well and lasted 5 months. You're talking about a totally different type of league. There's no relegation here. It doesn't really matter if you're bottom for 1 year, if you actually have progression in the way you understand the league, the way you can bounce back the year after. We've seen teams miss the playoff and win the league after. We've seen it happen. We've seen in teams being bottom of the Western Conference in July 2016 and turn around and winning MLS Cup on penalties in Toronto. We've seen that with Seattle in 2016, not that long ago. So hope is not always lost, and we have to remember what Montreal is going to do in 2018 in Major League Soccer, and it's discovering and learning how to lose so they can learn how to win after. Maybe I'm exaggerating, maybe I'm a bit naive, but I'm giving them more time than others.
Well, anyone that wants him fired, who do they want in? Like, Patrick Roy is not available. He just signed back with Quebec Ramparts.
No, but you're on. Yeah, it's not about the result. And yes, right now it looks terrible. Toronto's still behind Montreal, and Toronto's probably going to go above Montreal or not. We don't know. The way it's looking, nothing's more sure now. You never know anymore. But it's not over. It's still early. Like, come on. You think Philly's on a roll? No, they're probably not going to win a game in the next month. So they'll go back down. It's not over. Montreal didn't play their season. It's just the first quarter is done. It's almost the first third. They just didn't win the first part of the season. But they learned a lot of things. And trust me, looking at how Rémi Garde reacts to referees and reacts to play, he's learning a whole lot. Now it's what to do with what he's learning.
Yeah, I don't even think Joey can be a bit impulsive, but I don't even think he's that impulsive to pull the trigger this quickly. So anyone that's yelling for that, you're sort of you're meeting that cliche of the knee-jerk reaction to stuff. But Yeah, I think that they are a very interesting team in that summer winter. And I'm willing to go here. This, save this if you wish. If anyone wants to clip this and throw it back at me down the line. If I had to predict right now, Kevin, who's going to win the Voyageurs Cup, I'm going to pick the Impact. Don't tell my TFC friends that I just said that. And the reason I'm going to pick the Impact is combined in the fact that TFC, because of what's happening right now, is in full like, oh my God, we need to pull every point out of our pocket to get back into a decent playoff race. They don't want to be on the road in that first round. Like, they probably are still confident that they have the talent to get into the playoffs, but they're maybe not as sure that they won't finish in 5th or 6th anymore. So to get 3rd or 4th, they're really going to have to play perfectly. So that sort of puts that indication in there. We talked about Vancouver and their sort of desire to be kind of in that playoff race and sort of playing that middling role all around. So maybe they're not going to put all their eggs in that Voyageurs Cup basket. I think the Impact, they're going to make some changes in the summer and be looking and focusing on something to hang their hat on, to build upon. And just like TFC back in the day when they didn't have much going on, but they did put a lot of stock in winning the Voyageurs Cup and did successfully do that for 4 years in a row or 3 years in a row. At any rate, they won it quite a few years in a row.
2012 to 2015. 2011 to 2014. Something like that.
Yeah, they won it quite a bit, even though they weren't very good. And maybe the Impact might do the same thing. And I suspect that that's an opportunity. And Gallo's going to look at this as he's European. He's going to understand that, okay, we still have this cup, and this cup can get us into the CCL, and that can give us a fresh start next year, and will be something we can use to attract players even more. When I go to my legal friends and go, look, we're in the Champions League. We have this tournament in the fall or in the spring. So this is another opportunity to come play here. So right now, if I had to pick a Voyageurs Cup champion, I'm going to pick the Impact. I mean, that could change in a second, because who knows? But that's who I might pick. And they have every chance. All three of those teams you can make an argument for, right?
Yeah, and just to finish on the Impact, you're talking about a lot of personnel movement. And we forget that the Impact tried to do some trades. No one wants Audero right now. And there's a lot of players that Montreal just stuck with. If you looked at the salaries from last week, we didn't really talk about them a lot, but you can read them, you can find them, and it's already talked about, and it's not even that interesting. But just look at Montreal for a second, and you'll see value. That's not a lot of value. A lot of players that are maybe paid a bit too much. Not that I care how much money someone makes. Good for you. You make over $1 million, good on you. But it's a salary cap league, and we need value as a team in Major League Soccer. If you want to win, you need to have players that are cheap and producing more than expected. It's the expected production, and it's the ones that are performing above that will give you value, and that will give you points on the board to put in your damn standings, which is not happening right now. If you're looking at value, yeah, you have value in Samuel Piet, hometown discount, I guess, and other players like that, Anthony Jackson and Mal, yeah. Value in Mancosu, $800,000 for nothing, and other players like that, salaries in the 7, 6, 4, 5. Yes, you use time. You bring the salary cap hit to like 3, 4. But we've talked about it to death. Salaries between 2, maybe 3 now with the amount of TAM and GAM and bigger salary caps out there. 300,000 to 500,000. You should not have any player in that range, because there's no value. They have to be cheaper and produce like they're higher, or you get them at a DP tag, or you get them allocation. But you should not have hits of 500,000 constantly for players in your roster.
It's a different scale, but anyone, we're Canadian shows, so we have a lot of hockey fans out there, right? And you'll understand that in the hockey cap, you're okay with having $8, $9, $10 million players. You're okay with having players that are like $1 million, 2, 3 even, but what you don't want is $4, $5 million players, right? Unless they're producing way above what they are.
That's
what I'm saying. Same thing. Yeah. Different scale, right? You don't want those mid guys ranges. You don't want a salary cap league. You want to have the top guys, because you need that high end talent, and you want to have guys at the bottom end that are overproducing. And the Impact simply don't have that, and it's going to take at least a year for them to get rid of those salaries.
And that's when you can truly judge Rémi Garde, is when he's still dealing with. It's not even Mauro Biello's leg, because this has nothing to do with Mauro Biello. He wasn't the guy signing the players too. So this is still DeSantis and Braz's roster that unfortunately Rémi Garde has to live with. And maybe then we realize why he's not doing substitutions, because he doesn't, not that he doesn't trust those players, but he doesn't feel that they'll change the game by coming in, because, well, they're not showing him that they can. So maybe that's where the late substitutions comes from.
just look at Aduro for a second. He's a guy that has enough of a resume in MLS that if he was on $100,000 a year, you could probably get something for him, right? I mean, even look at Toronto. They could use another secondary scorer right now because of the injuries problems that they've had over the course of the year. But they're not going to trade for a guy that's getting paid what he's getting paid. They're not going to give anything up for him. They're going to have to basically hold on to his salary and give him away for free to get rid of him at this point. So you have to live it out. And here in Toronto, TFC went through that whole process. They had to get rid of all of those bad Mo Johnston contracts and into that secondary era, the Kevin Payne era, before they could really start to build, before Bezbachenko could start to put together the team that ultimately won a championship. And if you're in Montreal, you've got to have patience. And this year, this is 2014. This is TFC's 2014 right now. They've got to go through that. They could do things to make themselves look good, and they can do things to make the season more worthwhile, like compete for Voyageurs Cup, like maybe push for playoffs near the end. But ultimately, in terms of building a championship contending team, I think you're probably going to have to be a little bit patient at this point.
Yep, and now we've been patient enough. It's time to talk about Toronto FC. Another loss at home, this time against who did they lose against?
It was on the road, but yes.
On the road, yes. They lost they just have
New England. They lost 3-2.
How can you lose to New England? Montreal.
Well, it was okay this year, especially at home.
Yes.
They're in the playoff race right now. Look, they fell behind 2-0 in the first 10 minutes. The second goal in particular was a complete cluster, what. Just unable to defend right now. And there was a brief period, starting with the second leg of, against Guadalajara and moving forward to the games that followed in Major League Soccer, that sort of makeshift all fullback with Michael Bradley, Michael Bradley and the fullbacks, if you want to make a band name for it, they were able to sort of hold on for a few games, but now it's not working, and now the injuries are really starting to show itself. And maybe you're a non-TFC fan or a TFC fan right now screaming at your device that I'm making excuses for them, and maybe I am, but at the same time, when you have that many, no one anticipated they would have this many injuries at the back. Like, who does? Who thinks you're going to have 5 center backs out at the same time? That's just not something you can really plan for.
Usually you don't even have 5 on your roster. You usually have like 4, if you're lucky, 3 for sure. So when you have 5 injury, like, geez, any 16-year-old kids in the academy that I can call on an emergency basis or something?
Rocco Romeo, he's a center back right now, and he is in fact 16 years old and in the academy and playing in USL.
There you go.
So yeah, that's where they're at this point. It's either let Michael Bradley try and play back there, or put a 16-year-old high school kid in there and see what he can do. And I'm really high on Rocco Romeo's long-term prospects, but I'd like to see him play a couple more years in USL first. Thank you very much. No, it's. This is compounded, obviously, by the fact that Giovinco got the silly red card at the end. So now they're staring at the game on Friday against Orlando, or hot Orlando, without Giovinco, without Altidore, obviously, until after the World Cup. This is getting scary if you're a TFC fan. I mean, it's scary in the sense that, it's not really that scary because they are the defending champions, and you look at the talent level, and even if they don't manage to turn this around this year, flags fly forever, right? But it's still kind of like, oh God, did we sell ourselves? Like, did we make some kind of contract with someone with horns, and now we're paying the price back? I don't know.
Yeah, and the trauma was so severe that it's never too far away, and it always comes back to haunt you. When you were TFC fans from the beginning, you remember, and even though you want to remember the last 2 years more fondly, the trauma really isn't that far away.
And look, TFC Twitter right now is hilarious.
Yes.
Or terrifying, depending on your perspective. I mean, there's no sort of there's no middle level right now. Either you're like, going, get your head out of the sand, everything's going to be fine, or you're like, panic! Sorry, Kevin, I just blew your drums out there. But yeah, that's fine. There's no...
I have a limiter for you now, so you can't kill me anymore.
All right, there's no middle ground in this. It is what it is. It was a bad game, and they came back. They got the goal after they fell behind 3-0. They managed to pull 2 back. They got the Giovinco free kick, but I think that free kick goal followed by Giovinco getting a red card as he's running back to the center circle is the season in a nutshell so far, right? They're doing great things, but something's just not quite going right, just not like last year. And it shows how much of a fine line out last year was, how much everything had to go right. And they did have a near perfect season. They only had one minor slump last year. They didn't have injury. Like, there was no major injuries on that team last year. Even Josie was healthy for most of the year.
Even Josie, that's when you know you're not injured. You don't have a lot of injuries. Like even Josie Altidore was healthy last year.
Yeah, everything went right for them, and that wasn't going to happen 2 years in a row, and it's not happening right now. Is it time to panic? I don't know. Depends on what your perception of panic is. Yes, I think it's time to give up on them even getting a bye in the first round. I mean, there's no chance they're going to get out there. They would have to play nearly like 2.5 points a game. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I think you can reasonably expect that they could go 1.75 to 2 points a game. That kind of range is within their talent level if they can get healthy. And keep in mind that the 2-week World Cup break, there's no team in this league that is looking more forward to that 2-week break than TFC right now.
Yes, United States are not going there. Neither does Italy. Doesn't matter. Giovinco's not picked. But what if they could all take a 2-week break now? Everyone, you guys not doing anything for 2 weeks. Stay on your couches.
They will be below the red line when they're coming out of the World Cup break. So they will likely be below the line on August 1st. And that means that if they are to repeat, it's going to be because they're going to have the second half of the season charge. And if they can get completely healthy, they're capable of it. But right now, there's a lot of gut checks going on within the TFC dressing room. And there's going to be a lot of like self-evaluation and how much desire is going to be pushing forward, because they did have a 2-year run. And to sustain that type of intensity is going to be very difficult. And it's going to start. And in some ways, I think that this, I mentioned the Voyageurs Cup once already. I'll mention again. They're going to come out of that break into Voyageurs Cup games. They're going to start with Ottawa, and I think this is ultimately, normally you would think that they would sort of punt that Ottawa, not punt it, but they would sort of play casually in there. They would try and sort of, mix the lineup a little bit. I think that TFC is going to, need to sort of challenge its players and say, look, we've had a crappy start of the year, and one of our 3 trophies is done. Like, we're not going to repeat as a Supporters' Shield, so we can give that one away. We're not winning a treble 2 years in a row, but we do have a chance to win a double, and here is the opportunity, and we're going to start you players, and you better put a beat down on that USL team in leg 1 of this competition. This is all due respect to the Fury. That's a challenge for them. They're going to be starting out. They're going to be healthy at that point. They're going to have an opportunity to sort of turn it around right off the get-go, and I think that's kind of going to be a really telling series. If they scrape by Ottawa, then hold on, folks. This could be touch and go all the way, because they might not have the luck that they had last year. They might not have the dedication. They do have the talent. Unless you think that Stephen Beitashour was the reason they won MLS Cup last year, they still have the same amount of talent. So they still are amongst the most talented teams in this league, if not by far the most talented team in this league. And I love Stephen Beitashour as a player, and he was named to the provisional lineup for the World Cup today. So good for him. But, yeah, he wasn't the reason they won MLS Cup last year. And that's the only major change in that team from last year.
Yeah, that's true. All right. It's enough of Canadian demise in the world of soccer. We'll take a quick break and come back and talk about the prospects of sports gambling being legal in the United States and how this will affect the landscape of soccer.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back on Soccer Today thanks to all our patrons on patreon.com/Sports Podcasting Network. $2 a month gives you access to the Two Solitude Soccer Podcast, which we will have a brand new episode dropping either tonight or sometime tomorrow, probably sometime tomorrow, a bit after Soccer Today. We're just finishing last week's interview with a few bit of notes, and we'll have your last week's and this week's. We'll have a double week this week, so it's coming for patrons only, $2 a month. And if you want to give more, go ahead. We do support and appreciate your support, especially. Duane, talk about gambling, money. Today, the federal government, the United States, has revoked its law banning sports gambling. So in the next about 24 hours, going to be about 1 million gambling websites in the United States popping up, and there's going to be a lot of money put into sports gambling, and soccer is going to be one of those beneficiary, either in the sponsorship world of jerseys, kits with Paddy Power USA and the USL. I imagine you'll have a major sponsorship now with gambling companies, and it's gonna start really quickly. And basically, the sports world's just changed today.
Yeah, I mean, specifically what happened is the state of New Jersey had challenged a federal law which prevented states from legalizing single game sports betting. It had been legal, just like it is in Canada, to do parlay bets in certain cases. That's in Canada. A parlay, in case you don't know, is if you put multiple contests together, and so you have to have all of your events have to occur before you win the bet. They're considered a little safer because there's less chance you can sort of manipulate one of those, because you'd have to fix 3 different games, right? So it's difficult to fix. So they've been legal in some parts. Obviously, Nevada has always had the legalization, but the state of New Jersey, because of Atlantic City specifically, sort of challenged this because they felt that it was an unfair business practice, and they were successful in that. This has struck down the federal provision against it, which is going to allow individual states to put their own rules in. But as Kevin said, the bigger issue will be that now sport like online gambling is going to be legal across. So these online places like Bet365, companies like that, they can start to retake American bettors again. They couldn't for a while, and that's going to be a huge influence in the betting industry.
So we're talking about here major money, and there's a lot of daily fantasy companies right now. We're talking about DraftKings and those type of companies that have been laying low lately because of different rules and regulations in the United States. Now those laws are no longer, and they have millions of users, data on those users, how to reach them, and a lot of gambling companies now, and how this will affect soccer is one of the biggest. William Hill in the United Kingdom. We're talking about Bet365, 365, Paddy Power. Those major online sportsbook will start to again focus on the American market, and by way of Canada too, because we're so the proximity of it will be included in the different campaigns now and marketing that those big companies go and try to get. So I do feel this will change sports, and while we talk about the money, this, because of the amount of people who are going to bet on sports, you will have a lot more investment on a return of that investment as well with those sports companies. And I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of this year you start to see sponsorship of kits, of teams and stadiums, and a lot of new names coming into our vernacular like Paddy Power on a more consistent basis because of the rulings today.
Yeah, it's possible for sure. I think it might even end up helping people like Kevin and I too, because these companies will be looking to get their name out there, particularly those that are a little up and coming, shall we call it. The Bet365s are well known and well understood. Again, it's always kind of been the problem with the American bettors is that anyone who wants to have bet in the past on sports could. It's like watching HBO or streaming an NBA basketball team without cable right now. There were ways to do it for sure, but you had to jump through hoops, and you had to know how to do it in order to do it. This ruling is going to take that away and going to make it very easy for people to just go click, click, click. Here's my credit card, go. And get a payout too, which is equally important. Here in Canada, for instance, right now, it's legal. It's perfectly legal to bet on those online books, but it's very difficult to get your money back because a lot of the major Canadian banks will refuse to accept payments from them. So basically, you have to go through third-party servers to get your cash. So it becomes a pain in the butt to do it, which reduces the betting. And I think that this ruling might loosen that up too, right?
In Canada, the big reason to do that too is for a competitive reason, is because there's the government version of those sports book, which are allowed online. We're talking about mise au jeu in Quebec, misauger.com, misauger.ca. You can bet
Proline
here and Select and Sports Select. And there's those options across the board in Canada. So that's why, because of those, I don't want to say legit, because the other ones are legit as well, but it's just mainstream, the government one, where you benefit as a citizen with your taxes and the government. So there's the easy route, and they want to limit the amount, so that's why it's a bit more complicated when you use, example, sportsinteraction.com, which is licensed in Gibraltar and Equasa and Kanawage, and when you have other online sports book that are legal as well, but you need, like you mentioned, a third party. Sometimes it's like the Bank of Gibraltar will send you a check, but don't worry, it's going to clear once you deposit it.
Yeah, we'll take a little cut from it too if everyone's getting a little dip. So it's going to loosen stuff like that up. In the States right now, as it was, like, you simply couldn't sign up with an American address. So to bet, you'd have to get a credit card or you'd have to set up an account through one of those third-party payment services that was outside the country, and then you would have to give a fake address and you jump into hoops, right? So a lot of people, unless you were truly, you might as well have dealt with your bookie, is basically what it came down to. That's going to eliminate this. And this is the argument that people will make. There's a couple arguments people will make against this. The biggest one that's relevant to us is that
match fixing.
It's match fixing, and it's going to make it
point shaving. How about we haven't talked about this in a while, Duane? Can you give a quick update on what match fixing versus point shaving is?
Yeah, or spot fixing versus match fixing. Different terms that you'll hear out there. Match fixing refers to the specific manipulation of a result. So you're going to, let's say that you were betting Seattle was playing Portland, to use an MLS example, and you approach a whole bunch of Seattle players and say, I want you to lose 2-1 or just lose, period. And those players agree to manipulate the game. That's kind of what match fixing is. It's a little less, it happens, particularly in leagues that aren't that regulated. And this is where I think USL, or if the NASL comes back into the play again, would be more open to this, because the players are paid a little less and there's less attention given to these leagues. So they're more right for people doing stuff like this, because one of the greatest things that fixers hate is attention, right? They want to target leagues that don't have a lot of media coverage. And MLS, although we'd all wish it has more, still has guys like us and mainstream media as well covering it. So they would look to go a little bit below. But specifically, you call it point shaving, which is when that's usually a term in basketball or football, when there's a point spread and the team still might try and win, but they're going to try and win less than they would have otherwise. So if they were 3.5 point favorites, they try and win by 3. Spot fixing it relates to prop bets. A prop bet is a bet that refers to something that's not directly related to the end result of the game. So to use a soccer example, it might be how many corners there are. So it's whether you're betting over under on 13.5 corners in the game. So you're guessing that there's going to be a total of 14 or 13 total or corner kicks in the game. You bet over or under. So maybe you approach a player and say, just kick the ball out to touch 4 times in the game. So a defender you would approach and say that you're gonna accidentally clear it behind the goal 4 or 5 times just to make sure that we hit the over today. And that's a spot fix. And those are kind of the most common way fixing happens within soccer. And because you approach a player and a player might have they might have bills to pay that they can't afford, so they're open to the idea of getting some money on the side, but they have some integrity and they don't want to throw the game for their teammates. So you say, well, I'm not going to ask you to throw the game. I'm just going to ask you to kick the ball out of play 5 times so that we make sure that we hit the over. See, they agree and they take $10,000 for that, but then something happens. They go to kick the ball out of play and their eager fullback runs the ball down and saves it, so they can't get the corner. Then all of a sudden they owe this guy $10,000 and he goes, well,
how about you throw the next game?
Man, you kind of screwed me over. So what I need you to do is score an own goal tomorrow.
Yeah,
right?
You throw the game, or get a red card, or whatever the case may be. And that's where maybe we should finish the show. Does this decision this morning open Pandora's box of now us looking at games maybe with an asterisk, maybe with a little thought in our mind of, will this change? Will this bring what we've seen in the old Canadian Soccer League long time ago, wasn't that long ago, about match fixing? Are we going to see this happening? And are we opening Pandora's box in the United States of America with this decision today?
I'm going to say something that's going to seem counterintuitive. I'm going to say, no, this is the right decision for that. I say that as someone who does occasionally gamble on games. Not a lot, and usually, $5, $10 here, usually on ProLine, although I do have a Bet365 account as well that I use occasionally and probably will use a little bit more during the World Cup just for fun. I do it for fun. I enjoy it. It adds to my enjoyment of the game. So I do gamble, but I'm also very well aware of the pratfalls of it when it comes to match fixing and stuff like that. But the reason I say that this is actually a step in the right direction is because the best allies to people that are out to stop fixing are the legal gambling society. They don't want fixing. They want their lines to be legit. They want their industry to be legit. They will tip off leagues if they see dumb things happening on their lines. Like if you have a whole bunch of money coming in on a USL game from China, let's just say, a USL game that usually has $5,000 gambled on it. Suddenly there's $500,000 gambled on it, and $455,000 of it is from Beijing.
From Guangdong and Guanggun in Beijing or something in China. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, they're going to go, no, this game's getting taken off the line because something fishy's going on here. So it's actually a good thing to have legal options out there. It's the same idea that when you legalize marijuana, you take away the illegal trade of it, right? So that will ultimately, in theory anyway, take away some of the problems around it.
Yeah. Hopefully, yeah, because then the guy who used to sell that at the corner of the street was not just selling that. So you open Pandora's box of him showing in his left side of his coat instead of his right side, be like, you want anything else? But no, it's true. So you kind of doing the same thing. It's true. And it's interesting. I wonder what you think. You're listening to this right now. Tweet at us at Soccer Today SPN, at 24th Minute for Duane, and at Kev Laramee for myself. Let us know what you think, what you envision this rule change that does change anything for soccer in the United States, in Canada, in North America. Will this revolutionize? Will this bring more money? Will this help podcasts and other places with sponsorship money, with gambling websites and gambling corporations coming into our soccer world bubble? So that's interesting, right?
No, precisely. I'm Canadian, so I've had the opportunity to do this legally for a while now, although it is difficult for me to get my money out because I have to use a third party to get my money out not that I ever win, so never mind. But if I ever did win, I'd take a while to get it out.
One day.
I welcome it because I do, as I said, because I think it actually helps with the monitoring of this. I think that when you're in the weeds, it is far easier to hide in the weeds than it is to hide in an open field. So that's what I have to say about that, and I think that it's probably for the best, and it does actually help independent media producers as well, and smaller clubs that have those opportunity for sponsorships. It's a difficult moral question. I mean, I think back in this country when it's a different issue. So let's just take gambling off the table for a second. When they started to really push back against smoking and smoking ads, one of the things that they did in this country that we're in is they took away the opportunity for those companies to sponsor major events. So it used to be the F1 race in Montreal used to be sponsored by a cigarette company, if memory serves. I know that here in Toronto there was this major fireworks festival that happened every summer for years that was
Benson and Edges. Yeah, exactly. It was Benson and Edges here too. It was you're right. The players, Formula One drivers, the Indy, yeah, and that's where it hurt. And you're right. We'll see the counterbalance to that maybe with gambling now allowed to sponsor, because for sure you'll see a NASCAR car in the next few months with Bet365 or Paddy Power or whatever, because guess what? They're going to make a lot of money on people betting on NASCAR.
Yeah, and if as I said, because I do believe it actually will help with the monitoring of this, if that does in fact not only do that, but also allow less USL teams from going under, or maybe allowing where USL teams in that USL second division they're looking to create, or third division they're looking to create, to pop up because suddenly they have Bet365 is going to, we'll give you $50,000, sure, because that's going to help us and give us more exposure, and that's a little small line on our sheets at the end of the year. So if it helps there, then all the power to it. I have no moral objection to gambling. As I say, I do it occasionally. I enjoy it. It's something that adds to my enjoyment of the game. Like anything, and we'll do the caveat here. You only bet as much as you can afford to lose, and as long as you're in control of that, and as long as the responsible gambling sort of advocates are allowed to get their message out there to people, and that there are resources made available to people who may feel that they're getting into problems, then I have no problem whatsoever for it morally, and I think that we'll have more benefit than it will have harm in the long run, Kevin.
Absolutely. We'll be back to our regular time tomorrow, Tuesday, on Soccer Today, to talk about the world of football with a soccer perspective. We'll talk about the results of the weekend in Major League Soccer, our medals of the weekend, and whatever else is going on in the world of soccer. As always, you can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. You can find the podcast versions of all the show we do right here at the Sports Podcasting Network on our webpage, sportspodcastingnetwork.com, and anywhere you get your podcasts, at iTunes, Apple Podcast Store, anywhere you get your podcasts, as well as Google Play Store, Stitcher, Spreaker, anything that finishes by "-er" or "player," you can get the show. And as always, until tomorrow, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.